Captain Phillips, the true story of Captain Richard Phillips and the 2009 hijacking by Somali pirates of the U.S.-flagged MV Maersk, Alabama, starring Tom Hanks, Barkhad Abdi, directed by Paul Greengrass, written by Billy Ray, who helped write The Hunger Games and State of Play, based on Captain Richard Phillips' book about the events. Do you have a mini review for us, Bob?
I do. Captain Phillips. I give Captain Phillips a 4.5 out of 5.
Wow.
Suspenseful, yeah, I liked it. Suspenseful even with a known ending, and the brisk pacing makes it feel much shorter than it is. Newcomer Barkhad Abdi gives an impressive performance alongside Tom Hanks' impressive performance. I probably butchered his name, but yeah, that's my mini review. I really enjoyed this movie. I could come up with some minor quibbles, and or I could speak to little things that make it so that it's not a perfectly fit movie for Bob, I guess. But overall, it's hard to criticize. But I'm looking forward to your mini review because generally I'm a little nicer.
All right, my mini review. Greengrass expertly brings us right into the unfamiliar world of seafaring. Good performances by Hanks and Abdi, but the story suffers both because I already knew the outcome and because I suspect there were other more compelling parts of the story left untold. 3 out of
Mm.
5.
Ouch! Wow, what a disparity here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. But let me tell you what I did like about this movie, Bob, and I like this a lot. It's how well textured every scene was with just the right details. One of the strongest reactions I had to the movie was in being fascinated by the technical aspects of running that ship. And I wanted to see more about their communications protocols, the procedure for different situations. And one of the things I loved in particular was like when Captain Phillips called down to the engine room with what he wanted to do. And it was like Scotty on the Enterprise, except it was even better because we got to see the instruments the engineer was looking at. And I felt like I understood how much the ship could take based on looking at the instruments. And like I was qualified to be the engineer almost. And I loved stuff like that about the movie. It's like, wait, maybe I could have a second career as a ship captain somehow.
Yeah, it does. It does deceptively, perhaps, give you this impression that you know what's going on very effectively. Yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit too, and and it matters too because there's a lot of little things where they're trying to push the ship to its extreme to outmaneuver and out evade these pirates that are bearing down on them. So it was nicely done without it being very hammy or guy turns to the camera and says something like "she's gonna blow" or it didn't have any of that kind of stuff, which was nice.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that was like I say, my favorite thing about the movie. Even on the Navy ship with that captain there who wanted to negotiate all the time, just seeing the way his ship worked made me feel like, oh, is it too late to go into the Navy too and have a job like that? Or even with those Navy SEALs, I just felt like I was right there on the team practically. So all the stuff like that I credit Paul Greengrass for in the directing, I thought was really amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but here I am talking about what I liked. You're the one who loved it. Tell us more about what you liked, Bob.
Well, I really enjoyed that it was focused on telling a very specific story. I mean, you can't make stuff up better than this. I mean, you can try, but it's very telling that Hollywood, has been recycling themes and doing more and more B-list comic book type material just because I feel like they're running out of ideas. But this is a true story that happened pretty recently, and kudos to Greengrass for picking it up and running with it. And he does this effectively with true stories. And somehow, I don't want to overstate the point because it's not like you can take any true story and automatically it's going to be a better movie than like fake shit that you make up. But it resonates with me. Like there's a connection there, especially the way he put it together that really worked for me. I felt like it was very plausible. It was also showing a very humanistic side of both sides. It wasn't good guys and bad guys with soapboxes or monologues. It was just different people in different cultures colliding. I guess that's a nice way of saying it for the bad guys' side, these Somali pirates. But it effectively tells another side. It's not just good guys versus bad guys, and you can kind of see things falling apart as the plan doesn't go according to plan. So I liked watching all of that kind of more real stuff put into a movie than fake stuff that I'm used to.
It's interesting you say that because that's sort of, well, like based on a true story aspect of it. That's exactly what I don't think I liked so much.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and to me, based on a true story is almost always an indication it'll be worse than a made-up story.
Mm,
So here, but and it was interesting you said that they focused on one story because you have to choose which stories you're going to tell, especially if it's in real life. But I feel like that was a downfall of this movie. They chose a story of Captain Phillips to focus on. Fine. I mean, it's his book. He's sort of the sympathetic one there. But the thing is, I don't even remember many details from when this was in the news personally. But I know Captain Phillips makes it, and I knew the SEALs rescued him from the lifeboat. So there wasn't much suspense there. Sorry if that's a spoiler for anyone else, but in my opinion, anyone who remembers even less than I do about this just isn't paying any attention at all. So I'm not really counting it as a spoiler. Um, and then the other part was it kept giving glimpses of other stories that I thought uh, were even more compelling than this Captain Phillips one, or at least equally so, and I would have loved to spend more time on them. But then they pulled back from them. So first there was like the captain's relationship with the crew. There seemed to be some potential tension waiting to bubble up in the beginning, but then all that was forgotten by the middle.
mm,
The captain of the Navy ship that showed up to try and negotiate. That was another thing. It seemed like he was especially motivated to try and end things peacefully, but his higher ups didn't care about that, and just conflict like that could be something to explore. But no, the story just moved on. And of course, Muse, the main Somali pirate there. You're right that it was really interesting the way it gave him some context, but I feel like we only got bits and pieces of that. And there was a lot more that I would have loved to see dealt with on that front. In fact, I would be so bold to say that this would have been a much better movie if it had been Muse's story as the protagonist.
oh.
That would have been an interesting story to me.
Yeah, that would have been really complicated, but and harder to pull off maybe. But if done well, I could watch that. I could see where you're going. I'm going to disagree with you pretty boldly in the sense that I think that those things that you think are the faults of the movie are the strengths because every time it moved on in the same way that we move on in life. Like if it tried to drill down and eat any of those aspects, like for longer, maybe it could have done a little bit more on some of those stories, then it would have felt ham-fisted or over the top, like, you know, rising action, falling action, conclusion, because that's how stories work. When in reality, each of those stories moved on because the situation moved on. When he was working with his crew, there was some tension, but then it shows how they had to bind together to deal with that, a bigger issue. And then the guy who's negotiating, you want to see him end it peacefully, but then you get all this pressure from up top, and you hear rumblings of the White House being involved, and it just escalates and moves beyond that, and it's a chaotic environment, and it just shows it in a way to me that was like, this is probably very likely how each of these real life events happened. I mean, I know it's dramatized, and maybe I'm giving it more credit than it deserves because it was all put together as a movie, but if they did what you wanted them to do, they'd have to tell a very different story or cut out things or make it more like action movie heavy or something. I don't know.
Well, cool disagreement. I love it. And so my response to that would be, well, then why give us those snippets? Why tease me? Why act like they might explore this more and then just ignore it or not explore it more? Why give me a little bit without giving me more?
Yeah, because the story they want to tell is the story that that everyone knows, I suppose, the true events aspect and how it ends. And um, I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't have a good answer. It worked for me, but I can see how some of those little things maybe were a little underdeveloped. But it didn't bother me at all.
So tell me about the acting. What did you think about Tom Hanks as Cap?
I thought Tom Hanks did a great job. Now, there were some minor quibbles online about his Boston accent, but I swear everyone's Boston accent who isn't a person from Boston gets minor quibbles.
Yeah, people
as a,
from Boston like to say that that's one of the hardest accents. No one can do it. And so
oh, I'm sure. Yeah, right.
whether or not someone can, they always complain about it. Whatever.
Right. So, for me, it was effective. It didn't bother me at all. I will say Tom Hanks. Um, okay, I got to say this in a careful way because it's going to be weird.
Can't
But
wait.
like, on the one hand, his performance affected me. Like I was almost close to tears toward the end. Like I thought he did a really nearly perfect job at reaching through the screen and like grabbing you by the emotional shoulders, or I'm making up metaphors or something, but I was just like riveted by what he was trying to communicate. And it seemed very real and very plausibly acted exactly how it would play out, especially the ending. But on the other hand, um, the thing with Tom Hanks is like I've seen him do this type of acting like 27 other times, so I could see the Tom Hanksness of it as a consistency sort of thing that didn't make it perfect. And I don't know what to say because it feels like I'm holding him to a higher standard because I've seen him do these dramatic roles in so many films, but he was a little too much himself. But holding that constant, it was still a very powerful performance for me. Does this make sense at all?
I think it makes sense. I mean, I think it was just fine to have the Tom Hanksiness. This is like the perfect role for him, right? Um, just he's like a regular dude, but with just a touch of the extraordinary about him for being a regular dude, you know.
Yeah.
And that's the Tom Hanks right there. So I feel great. If you're casting the right guy, then that's no problem for me. But it sounds like you really liked the performance.
I did, yeah, yeah.
What about Barkhad Abde?
Yeah, now, in my mini review, I state as much. Really thought he held his own. Like, he was an impressive second lead almost, alongside Tom Hanks. He brought a lot of character and nuance to a role that could have been, done as the bad guy with no reason to want to root for him. You don't want to root for him necessarily, but you want to see. And there are a couple of points, if you didn't know the ending of the movie, there are a couple of points where it could have gone a different direction if different choices were made, and you could have seen an even earlier peaceful resolve. And you actually feel bad for the pirates in some sense. You want to see it resolve better than it does in real life. And I think that's credited to these performances that show them as, you know, uneducated and inequipped, ill-equipped to perform what they're, they didn't really think through some of the aspects of taking a giant freighter hostage, but then at the same time, they had their reasons and own circumstances to deal with, and I thought it was done well.
Yeah, I thought Abdi was pretty good in the role. Back to our disagreement, I feel like the role was sort of half sketched out. There was the makings of a second lead almost there, but I don't think that the material was quite that much to justify that. But what he did have to work with, I thought he did a great job.
Oh, interesting. I feel like if they did, I think this was the aspect of the story where they were really going out on a limb. I'm sure this guy is still alive, and I guess I should say spoiler alert, but I think we all know that too. And he's living his prison sentence out in the U.S. So they had some research they could do, I'm sure, but at the same time, I felt like a lot of the backstory and way they put together this nuanced character was sort of straining the based on a true story type side of this because it wasn't really his story. So if they would have done any more, then it would have gone into manufactured land, and maybe that's okay. I don't know what the rules are of making a based on true events movie. Like if that's bad, if you like can't go beyond a certain limit for making up stuff for the secondary character to have a good story.
Oh, I think they are fine taking liberties if they feel like taking liberties. But I feel like they told us a few things about his backstory. They showed us a little bit, but like when he was dealing with his boss, who was threatening to disown him if he didn't do it right, or since he failed partially. I wish we could have got more about that because it told us that it was a big deal that I had to go through with it. But I didn't really get a chance to see all the detail or to hear the conversation or figure out what history or what future might await if he didn't. It would be bad, like crossing the streams.
Right. Yeah, this is another one where it worked well for me. The kind of fragmented, incomplete storytelling felt reminiscent of stories I see of people every day. But as a movie, I can see how it could have been tighter or given a little more on some of these things like that, for example.
All right. So if I were to give my final word before we throw it to you for the final wrap up. Yeah, I'll just say I really enjoyed some of the details. That was my favorite part, and I credit Paul Greengrass for that. It's just that I spent a lot of my time bored with the predictable main storyline and wondering about the other stories they weren't telling. So to me, it's fine, but not a must-see.
Okay, let me ask you this though. If you didn't know the ending, do you think that would have increased you? Like if you like were out of the country, say, for some reason, and you didn't follow movies or current events, and then you came back and you saw this movie and you're like, what was that about? Oh, I didn't know. And that was the first you heard of the story. What would you think then? I guess that's a hard question to answer, but
Yeah, I mean, it might have helped, but I feel like when it's based on a true story, um, you sort of got to bite that bullet. I mean, that's one of the things about based on a true story. But it might have helped. It may have helped.
okay. And
I
then
don't
one
know.
more question. How was the pacing for you? Because this was a very long movie, and I felt like it didn't feel that long, surprisingly, and because I think we both kind of agree that typically movies shouldn't be certainly not over 2 hours unless there's really some compelling reason why that can be justified. And for me, this movie was a good example of that case. Like I don't know what they would have taken out to make it shorter, and I didn't really care that it was long. And I'm just curious if that was an issue for you.
I thought it dragged on a little bit. I thought they spent too much time in the lifeboat. I wasn't quite sure why we had so much, from a storytelling point of view, why we had so much back and forth. Are we going to negotiate more? Are we just going to try to set up to get him with the SEAL team? Oh, we're going to do one. Oh no, let's negotiate more. Oh no, let's just go through with the plan. I felt like they waffled on that, and they could have taken out like a big chunk of that.
Uh-huh. Okay. Again, yeah. Okay, so my final word is I loved watching it play out. I thought it was a slice of an interesting story and showing incomplete versions of lots of different components of it, just like I would see in real life. And I thought that the way it came together, it really worked for me. I feel like I'm rehashing a little bit, so I'll just say it's good. I recommend it. I think it's one of the better movies this fall. But take into consideration what Logan just said.
Right on.